In episode 2, when Nancy and Eleven get to the Wheeler household, it's a bloodbath. Mrs. Wheeler did all she could to protect Holly from the Demigorgon who came through the ceiling. Even Mr. Wheeler, who had been outside at that moment and then walked inside to a big surprise, also tried to fight it off. But Demigorgons are just too powerful. This particular Demigorgon left both Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler in a pool of their own blood, and it took Holly back to the Upside Down. So what Nancy and Eleven walked into was Nancy's parents on the floor in a bloody mess. Holly gone, having no idea where she was taken. But luckily for them, the portal to the Upside Down was still open. So Eleven took her shot. She walked right through it before it closed, and she searched for Holly. Meanwhile, you had Nancy, who called the ambulance to try to save her parents' life. When Lucas and Mike overheard this on the radio, they also headed straight to the hospital to see what was going on. Upon arrival, the Wheelers were rushed into emergency surgery, hopefully to save their lives, but it was 50-50. And because of what went down, Nancy beat herself up a lot. She just felt like she could have done more to protect her family. And Mike did his best to say, Nancy, you couldn't have done anything. Like, what were we supposed to do? But try telling Nancy that in the moment. She was hell-bent on taking the blame for all of this. Nancy started getting really dramatic, saying that Vecna isn't going to stop until everybody's drained of any happiness. And that's when Lucas piped up and said, no, something's not right with the situation. I mean, if Vecna really wanted to punish us, why didn't he do it himself? Why did he send a Demigorgon to grab your sister? And also, why did he leave your parents alive? Why didn't he just kill them? I mean, Vecna never leaves things unfinished. If Vecna wanted to punish you guys, he would have just slaughtered your entire family for you guys to find. I mean, look, I don't know what happened, but what I do know is this is pretty much exactly what happened to Will. And it's almost to the day of when it happened to Will. And I don't really believe in coincidences. But you know what? We got Will back, and we're going to get Holly back because Eleven's down there. And if anybody can get Holly back, it is Elle. Lucas then leaves both Nancy and Mike to just be alone, and he heads up to Max's room to hang out with her for a little bit. Meanwhile, back at the Wheeler household, not only have the police arrived, but the military arrived as well. The story that Nancy gave the police is that she arrived on her own. She never brought up Eleven. But for the military, who's been looking for Eleven, they don't buy it. And they decide to look at the security camera footage in a 2-block radius. And a little while later, Dr. K, the woman who appears to be in charge of all of this military operation, gets the photos back, and sure enough, there's Eleven in the front seat of the Wheeler car. She demands that they find Eleven, because to her, Eleven is the key to ending all of this. And right now, she's got men dying every day trying to contain whatever this is, and they can't find this girl. Of course, Eleven has made it to the Upside Down, where it doesn't take too long before she finds Hopper. Hopper, who is really surprised to see her. She quickly explains why she's there, the whole backstory with Holly, the Demigorgon. And then they luckily get a little bit of a tip on where the Demigorgon took Holly. Because Mrs. Wheeler fought so valiantly, smashing a wine bottle and trying to stab the Demigorgon, that the Demigorgon is leaking. It's leaving a blood trail that's easy enough for Eleven to follow. All of this is a lot for Hopper to take in. He's also really pissed off that Eleven has made it to the Upside Down because it's against everything he ordered, but Eleven doesn't care. As they continue to follow the blood trail and Hopper continues to harp on the fact that Eleven disobeyed his orders and she's being hard-headed, it finally comes to a head when Eleven notices that Hopper is labored, and that's because he took some damage in that fight with the Demigorgon before. When Eleven sees this, she starts trying to patch Hopper up a little bit, make him feel better, and the two have a little bit of a heart-to-heart where Hopper talks about losing his daughter. How hard that was, how he fought in the war, but watching his daughter fight for her life was something he had never seen before, and she was the bravest person that he had ever seen. While it's pretty clear that Hopper is just simply worried about Eleven and putting her in danger, there's no point of really arguing the fact because they're together at this point in the Upside Down, searching for Holly. And then all of a sudden, they hear something. They think it's a Demigorgon, so Hopper decides to load up his weapon. But when they get closer, it's not a Demigorgon at all. They find little Holly's shoe, so they know that they're headed in the right direction, but they can't really go any further because what they're looking at is a full-on wall. I mean, think Game of Thrones ice wall, but this is like Stranger Things Demigorgon wall. It's weird looking, and they don't know how to get through it. Now, back at the surface, you've got Joyce trying to get the generator back up and communications back up so that they can locate Hopper because the van has died out and thus lost Hopper. For Steve and Jonathan, they have to get a jump. And as they're waiting for the jump that can restart the van, they start getting into it. Jonathan having enough of this toxic masculinity bullshit that he's been dealing with since he came back from California with Steve, thinking that Steve is trying to weasel his way back into Nancy. And Steve shooting back, dude, we're friends. That's it. And you've been super paranoid since you come back from California. I mean, maybe just focus on making her happy because it's pretty clear right now both of you guys are miserable in this relationship. But their petty argument takes a back seat when up walks Dustin, battered and bloody. Now, he gets in the van and the story he tells them is that he just fell off his bike and he flaked. And Steve doesn't buy that. He knows that Dustin was pretty clearly jumped, and he has a pretty good idea of who he did it. And that's exactly what happened. Dustin went to Eddie's gravesite, and those jocks ended up jumping him because Dustin scared one of them by putting a snake in the guy's locker. So they beat the crap out of him. It caused Dustin to miss the meeting, and Steve just starts going in on him. I mean, for the fact that he's been a dick, for the fact that he clearly is lying about what actually happened to him, and the fact that if he had been there and not gotten his ass beat, they'd have at least a better chance of still being connected to Hopper instead of just driving around this one particular zone, hoping that they get lucky. And as they're continuing to argue about this, Jonathan is in the back just trying to get a signal, so he's getting more and more upset. It's a very tense car ride for everybody involved. Back at the radio station, though, Joyce is having issues because, she's a mom that doesn't really understand technology. Robin's trying to do her best, but Robin's also concerned with what happened with Will. She asks her, hey, when Will has these visions, has this ever happened before where, like, everything short circuits? And Joyce says, no, not really, but do me a favor and go fix it. Because what Joyce really wants to do is talk to her son, one-on-one. She asks Will what happened, and Will says he was looking at everything through the eyes of the Demigorgon. He was seeing what it was seeing. He was thinking what it was thinking. But he has no idea why it went after the Wheelers or why it took Holly. Joyce mentions how this doesn't make any sense. They severed the connection, but Will tells her, I don't know if the connection was ever truly severed. Ever since he took me, I was permanently changed. These feelings of connection, they come and go, but that summer when the gate opened, I felt it again. It went away when I was in California, but the day after I came back, I felt it again. And it's worth mentioning that every single time Will feels it, he starts feeling it on the back of his neck. Will then tells his mother he's closer than ever before. That's when they're both interrupted by Robin, who is listening to the conversation and says, well, maybe you're like a radio receiver, like how when you're closer to the signal, it's loud and clear, but then when you get far away, there's static. And to Will, that actually makes perfect sense. He gets excited about this and says, yeah, you know what, that's probably how we're going to find Holly, is me, using me to find her, like a radio signal. He then tells both of them that earlier in the woods he had a vision, and he didn't understand it at the time, but maybe he was seeing it through the Demigorgon's eyes too. If he goes back to that site, maybe he can connect to the hive and go back to that signal and find out where she is. But Joyce doesn't want him doing that. Again, helicopter mom, she wants to wrap him in bubble wrap. What she's really concerned about is the fact that if he does this, Vecna can once again take control of Will. But to Will, this is their best idea, and if they don't do something, Holly's going to die. Joyce, though, is adamant that they're not going to do that. They're going to stick with the plan, getting the radio station back up, communicating with everybody, finding out where Hopper is. That's what the plan was initially. That's what the plan's going to be now. They're going to get everybody back, but they're not going to risk another life doing so. However, again, you've got a helicopter mom, and then you've got the best chance they have. So Robin takes it upon herself later that night to kind of pull one over on Joyce. She sees a red light that's always on one of the control panels and says, oh my God, the flux capacitor is acting up. It's a two-man job. I'm going to go fix it right now, but I'm going to take Will with me. And then she pulls Will aside and says, look, obviously the flux capacitor thing was BS, but your idea is the best idea we've had. So we're going to sneak out and we're going to, see if it works. And that's what they do. So they head out to go, quote, work on the flux capacitor. Later in the night, Joyce does end up radioing Jonathan, Steve, and at this point, Dustin, and says, hey, is the flux capacitor messing with your signal too? And they're all pretty confused about that, having no idea what's going on. But what's going on is that Robin and Will have arrived in the woods, and they're heading to the exact location where Will had his spell earlier. As they're walking, Robin addresses the elephant in the room of what Will may or may not have overseen the previous day in the hospital. Robin about to hook up with a candy striper, but Will assures her that it's no big deal. He didn't see anything. I mean, after all, we're in season 5, and it definitely seems like Will is an ally, if you know what I mean. However, when they get close to the location that Will had his vision, there's a spiral made of rocks on the ground. And that's when Will remembers the vision of him spinning around, but there was also laughter, which means that maybe if they get closer to the school, the signal will get stronger. So they head there. They arrive there a little while later, and Will is like, yeah, I think this matches. I mean, I must have been seeing things through Holly at this point because I was on this merry-go-round in the sky and I was spinning around. Robin's a little confused because at this point they had thought that Will was seeing things through the Demigorgon, and he says, no, I did too, but think about it. Vecna controls the hive mind, which means he's a part of it too. So when he searches for his victims, he sees what they see. So what if I was seeing everything through the eyes of Vecna's next victim, which would mean that I was Vecna? And as he's having this realization, there's a realization that's happening in the hospital with Mike. He's starting to realize that that imaginary friend that Holly had might not have been imaginary. Because after what Holly told him about how Mr. Whatsit told her that there were monsters in Hawkins, they were coming after kids, and then she herself was taken, he's starting to believe what Lucas believes. There are no coincidences. I mean, the theory clearly has holes, but they need more information. And to get that information, they need to go to the one person that is currently available that would know anything about Mr. Whatsit, and that's Mrs. Wheeler. Getting to Mrs. Wheeler, though, is going to be an issue. She's basically under lock and key by the hospital. She's not being allowed visitors at all. So it's going to cause both Mike and Nancy to fake candy striper patient to sneak into a room, but they're able to do so. And Mrs. Wheeler is really banged up. I mean, she's on the mend. She can't talk. She could have to write down her answers. But they start questioning her on anything she knows about Mr. Whatsit. What he looks like, which is a hat, a vest, a pocket watch. And then they ask her, did Holly ever say what his name was? And she nods and writes down the name Henry. Because what happened to Holly, at least in her mind, was she was taken by Henry, a.k.a. Vecna. Although everything was great. The sky was blue and sunny, and all Holly cared about was that her friends and family would be protected. And Henry told her, I'm absolutely going to protect your friends and family. Don't worry. You're going to be safe here. As he lured her into the house. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.